Welcome to the Media Leader Podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. Last week, the digital advertising trade body IAB UK unveiled new research forecasting a mature digital market, a fast-growing video and retail media market, and strong potential for gaming. It also found, based on interviews with 40 industry leaders, that the marketing funnel, as we've long known it, may well not survive a digital future in which more media channels become shoppable and generative AI proliferates, changing how consumers seek information about products and services. James Chandler is Chief Strategy Officer at IAB UK. In an op-ed for the Media Leader last week, he argued that not only is the future funnelless, but that all media will soon become retail media. I wanted to invite James on the podcast to allow him to elaborate on his argument and future gaze with me about potentially massive shifts in consumer behavior going forward and how advertisers should be planning now to react. This is that conversation. I hope you enjoy. James Chandler, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So last week, IAB UK released Futurescape. It's a new study that aims to forecast some of the biggest shifts that will shape advertising, media, and consumer attitudes over the next 5 and more years. In your own words, I'm curious, what would you say were the biggest takeaways from the research, and also what makes you feel confident in the findings?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I think this is something different for the IAB. I think we've got, and have had for a long time, a lot of credibility in the big ad spend study that we do, which we've done for so many years. But I guess that's about looking back at what's happened in the previous year. We've been pretty good at the stuff that's happening in the near future and right now. So a lot of that tends to be firefighting, reacting to stuff, HFSS, a cookie's going to go away. So it was a bit of a departure, a very intentional one for us to get into this, slightly longer term future. What could be happening in 5 years' time, around 2030. There were a whole bunch of, hypotheses that we went into it for, that we were trying to prove or disprove. And there's a whole load of stuff that we just, based on the people that we talked to, we never would have got to on our own. But I think some of the significant things, retail media is huge for us. It's huge for the industry. You can't look for not seeing and hearing about retail media. The sense was that momentum is going to continue, and this is just going to get more and more advanced. We're going through this sort of period of complexity, but that's going to kind of sort itself out. You start to bring creators into the mix, and it starts to get quite interesting. You look at what China are doing now, which is a very sort of creator commerce model, but the retailers are kind of all on board. So, retail media, all media becoming retail media, I guess is what we're talking about. It would have been utterly remiss of us not to kind of go deep on AI. And I think our biggest learning and provocation around AI is that brand advertising just becomes more important than ever. If you're going to have AI curating so much of what you do, actually building brand in order to even, be considered or be thought of is going to be more important than ever. And the sort of the broader one we got to quite early was around this kind of traditional marketing funnel, and how this isn't new news to people listening to your podcast, but how that is just fundamentally changing, particularly how we think about channels. If you think about a sort of an old school marketing funnel, you're, building awareness, driving consideration, getting someone to do something. In a sort of an old world, you would then start to tag on different channels that can do that. So maybe telly does that big awareness bit. And right at the bottom, once upon a time, you probably would have had digital that's sort of, converting people, getting them to do things. We sort of know, and it's well-trodden ground, that people aren't working like that. The sort of the smartest planners and strategists for a while haven't been working like that. But if you fast forward into kind of 2030, it's even more profound, given you've got all of this kind of blurring around channels and how people convert and the way in which they're doing it. It just won't be a thing. We won't be talking about a kind of traditional marketing funnel anymore. So they were probably the kind of the three main things. And like I said, proved a lot of the stuff that we thought, but we discovered lots of things I think we never would have by talking to some very smart people.
I'm going to ask you questions about all of those different subjects, starting with the funnelless future. In an op-ed for the Media Leader last week, you argued that the future is indeed funnelless, as you alluded to. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by a funnelless future? Because to me, it seems like surely there's going to be a basic funnel in terms of consumer behavior from awareness to consideration to purchase that will have to necessarily continue. But is it just that it's going to look different?
Well, I just think immediacy is going to be the biggest thing. And, you probably saw that if you sort of do the potted history of it, the internet comes along and suddenly I don't have to go somewhere physical and buy something. Mobile then comes along and that's made even easier. And then we start doing things, when I was working in mobile, I used to go and talk to clients about, sofas were being sold and people were buying cars. So, I was getting laughed out of rooms, but that's a kind of a normal behavior now. So the immediacy becomes even more intense with mobile. And of course, with the advent of AI and the sophistication around digital, you can go from that sort of typical awareness all the way through to buying something and becoming a customer, in the space of seconds. That could be a post in social media. It could be something I listen to on a podcast. So you don't necessarily need to sort of think in that very rigid linear way anymore. So I think you're right. Perhaps it's still there and always going to be. It's good, solid marketing science. But the immediacy is the kind of the real change. And then you get into the realms of, immersive formats like AR and VR, which are going to make that even easier. Shoppable television, huge in the States. You're starting to see Prime Video play with it, other platforms as well. But, even what we've considered for so long has been this kind of the mainstay of, building awareness with television. That's, within a click or a tap, you're able to purchase something, put something in a basket, shop, whatever. So it's all very immediate, and it's all I can kind of jump on it and do it straight away. I'm not trying to sort of push someone through this slightly old-fashioned funnel anymore.
In the op-ed, you argue that advertisers should consider taking a more content-led approach rather than a channel-led approach. But because of these channels being necessarily different, even within social media, individual platforms require vastly different creative or different strategies, different types of media investment. How should advertisers be thinking about, especially like in terms of internal team management, how they want to strategize around, okay, if we're going to move away from channel-centric media planning, or if I'm a brand marketer, a channel-centric approach, less channel-centric approach, what do they need to do instead?
Well, I guess everything changes. You've hit the nail on the head there, in that even if you look at the way, certainly when I worked in agencies are structured around channels. You had a digital team, a team that bought telly, a radio team. We were specialists in all of these, so they were sort of set up to work in that way. It really isn't going to be like that further down the line if it's not changing already. I think there'll still be a focus on ad formats. Quality is going to be really important. Audience is going to be important. But I think it's starting to feel very, very difficult to think about channels. Just take podcast as an example. Like, what is a podcast? YouTube, I was seeing it talking about, huge percentage of podcasts that typically started life as something that you listen to and you might be doing something else are now watched on YouTube. Our own ad spend number, where we collect podcast spend, which is phenomenal, and it's up, and it's going to overtake streaming this year, most likely. We're probably really undercooking that because we're only really including that kind of pure audio thing. So, and if you think about a brand like the Mail Metro Media, they're not a kind of a newspaper that you can read online. They're in podcasting. They're creating content. They're on TikTok. They have a channel within Snap. So thinking about these things as channels kind of doesn't work anymore. They exist as kind of media brands, and that's the bit that you've got to get right. And you need to be creating formats, which the other thing that plays through in Futurescape is the future is an AV future. Almost everything will become audiovisual, which sort of get you thinking. If you just treat kind of AV as a channel, it becomes very blunt and basically sort of means everything. So I think there's a shift there, but you're right. It's how agencies are structured. It's how media owners and sellers are going to go to market. And on top of that, I guess it's the way consumers think about stuff. They're not thinking about, I'm going to sort of listen to this channel or do that. They're just consuming stuff where it makes sense for them to do it.
It seems like every media owner I've talked to over the past several years is all arguing that they're a full funnel proposition now. And is that actually true? Can all these different types of media owners truly offer full funnel opportunities? I understand that digital gives the opportunities for things like shoppability, and I'll ask a question about that in a moment, but I'm curious whether or not all of these media owners can actually have successful propositions that advertisers universally are going to want to buy from.
I think the level of success is going to differ, and I think that's to be seen. But I think if you look at one area, if you look at retailers coming in and becoming media owners, I think they genuinely can do that full funnel bit. Because yes, they can tell you exactly what's been bought and the lifetime value of that customer, but at the very top as well, they have this incredible first-party data that you can start to use to build and drive awareness. There's partnerships in place where I can go and buy AV sort of TV-like assets to do that job, and they can do that full funnel thing. They can nudge me at some sort of online checkout. They can ping me in store. So I think retail media has kind of made us see that, yeah, this is possible. It genuinely is, both from a targeting right at the top all the way through to has it worked and is it effectiveness. I think they're showing us that it's possible. Now, of course, not every seller or publisher or platform even has got that level of data and that ability to tell you specifically which business outcome you've driven. The sort of the retailers, the likes of Amazon, are unique in that sense. But yeah, I think that's a world that we're going to get into. The interesting part is for advertisers and agencies to try and decode some of this and kind of think what your question's getting at. Who are the ones who can genuinely do this versus the ones who, have a slide, a very clever slide, which is talking about full funnel, but can they actually deliver on it?
Mm. So you've mentioned a couple times that you think retail media, or all media, will become retail media, and that retail media owners obviously have a likelihood of extreme growth over the next couple of years. I mean, I think we've already started to see that over the last 2 years or so. What's the opportunity for media owners and advertisers, specifically when it comes to shoppable formats? I'm thinking not just retail media, but also on TV, like broadcasters doing shoppable TV. And can this be applied to other media owners and not just sort of the audio-visual ones?
Yeah, I think so. I think what's going to have to happen is you're going to just see these new types of partnerships that perhaps we didn't think would be possible before, but possibly because my experience of media, often it gets quite tribal when you think about it from a channel point of view. I couldn't possibly put these two things together. They're either competing for spend or eyeballs or whatever it might be. But I think what they will start to understand is that if they can forge new partnerships which have kind of, a retailer at their heart, which can understand the effectiveness, what's being sold, who's sort of coming out of category, paired with the amazing brand building qualities of something like television, I think you can start to get something quite interesting. I don't think we're looking at, can one business do all of that? I think if you looked at a Tesco right now, just to give an example, they don't have a broadcast channel with loads of eyeballs on it. They need to go and make some sort of partnership with it. Behind that needs to sit some clever kind of ad tech to do it. So I think in order to get to this sort of future that we're imagining by 2030, where we sort of scrap the word retail and it becomes all media, you are going to start to see partnerships that are new, that maybe wouldn't have made sense five years ago or kind of a decade ago, because I think everyone wins. And I go back to that China example that I used at the start. There you have creators who are front and center, effectively selling products. Built into that is all sorts of data around targeting. And then you've got the retailers who aren't front and center, but are providing the back end, the kind of the measurement effectiveness bit, and everyone wins. Creator gets more money, they get some sort of share of what they're buying. Retailer wins because they do the fulfillment. So if you look at that model and what's happening there, it kind of feels like years away, but you can certainly see that's a direction we're going in. And when I look at something like TikTok Shop, I think TikTok Shop is just going to explode over the next few years. At the moment, parts of it feel a little bit clunky to us at the moment because it feels new. We're not seeing it everywhere we go, but I can certainly see that model of kind of retailers and creators, platforms, media owners coming in to form these new partnerships. And I think that's when you're going to start to see this kind of thing come to life.
I can definitely see it as well, but I can only sort of visualize it for the mediums I think where it currently exists, if that makes sense. So TV, it makes sense to have a shoppable format. You watch an ad, buy the product. You have a remote control that allows you to do that. On social media, it makes sense. You can just tap on a little, banner that comes up saying, do you want to buy this product? Or you can click on the product itself. Lots of different ways to pretty seamlessly transfer you from the sort of I'm watching an ad into actually buying the product pretty quickly. But I don't know exactly how that might be the case for out of home or audio or a publishing brand that, maybe they have a product recommendations vertical, but that also could, if they're saying go buy the product right now from our website, then how much do you trust that product recommendation vertical? So what should the more traditional media owners be thinking about when considering, okay, if a lot of advertising might be moving toward shoppability, how could they make it work within their formats?
Well, I think as you've talked about it there, I think there's probably two things you can do. Is one, try and figure out how you make it work within a kind of an out-of-home format. I'd sort of argue digital out-of-home, I would put that into that kind of AV bucket anyway. Maybe audio, maybe print. So I think you could spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to enable that. Or I think you get into a world where you accept that this future, basically everything is becoming AV, and you need to find a way to kind of play in there. It really is a video future. We expect through some of the forecasting that we've done in Futurescape, 34% of all digital ad spend is going to be some sort of video. And if you think it probably accounts for about 14 last year, so it's going to grow massively. So I think there's a go and fish where the fish are swimming. You could spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do yours, but I think about self-serve models when they came to the platforms released a self-serve model, which suddenly meant for SME advertisers there weren't minimum spends, there wasn't this accessibility around television and this kind of thing. I can literally put it on a credit card, I can see how it's working, I can tweak it kind of within a day, and it just kind of works. So I think we could have just figured out how do we make IOs easier to get to people, or how do we bring down that threshold? I think it just sort of needs a sort of entirely new thinking in order to make it work. And it's quite hard to imagine how you would kind of do that in an audio setting. Yeah.
One for companies to think about, I suppose, if they're not actively in that shoppable space, whether or not that's something that they can do and if they even want to do it at all. The report makes a lot of mention of generative AI, that it may make substantial changes to media consumption. I mean, we've already seen how Gen AI search has begun. Well, I guess it's harmed traffic to publishers, but consumers are using it to query bots looking potentially for product recommendations or answers to questions. I'm curious how you expect Gen AI to change consumption habits further and what that then means for advertisers especially.
Well, I guess it's going to be the ultimate kind of curator, whether that's entertainment or information about products, news, which we're kind of seeing already. So it's going to change how we see media, and discovery will change in that as well. I think about my own habits. I kind of go to Google and I'm looking for the answer to something. I mean, it's kind of rare that I get past what Gemini's telling me at the top now. It tends to be about right, and I might kind of scroll down and try and understand it, but maybe it's the world we work in, but I'm not sat there sort of scrutinizing the sources and that kind of thing and trying to seek out other things. So if my behavior is my sort of focus group of one and you play that out, it's kind of more important than ever that you are either creating things or trying to drive discovery that can feed what the AI is going to serve up to you. I mean, some of the numbers we put behind it are going to be huge. We think ad spend with Gen AI platforms, so tools and things that will be serving ads, we think could be just over 3 billion is a sort of a low bet. It could be as high as 6 billion, depends on how they develop and what the uptake will be. That's a sizable chunk of ad spend. And of course, as you just pointed to, Jack, it's going to take a significant share of search spend as well as you start to get, assistants, agents, which are going to be doing lots and lots of streamlining and efficiency stuff. So yeah, it's big. It's definitely happening. It does feel like we're in this period at the moment where we're all still trying to slightly work it out, both on a personal, on a business level, how audience is using it. Is it purely an efficiency thing? Can it do more for me? So I think we're in a really interesting place at the moment. But yeah, no doubt this is going to grow, and we think at pace.
We've talked a lot about the sort of I guess, performance end of the funnel in terms of people actually making purchases. But you did mention at the start that you have a strong belief that the brand marketing will become even more important today. And I'm just sort of curious how these things align, because on one end, there is the belief that there's probably going to be a lot more advertising that is going to be, if the funnel collapses, a lot more shoppability is possible. So where does brand actually need to come in then? Is it working with media owners in different ways, or is it really just pushing the same type of, I guess, creative and the same type of media planning, albeit adjusted slightly to sort of say, well, also you can go buy this product right now?
Yeah, I still think there'll be certain formats that build brand better than others. I think there'll still be probably moments where you can do that. You can do that better than others. But the really clear recommendation in the section of Futurescape, which is around AI, is really to double down and go big on brand advertising. Advertisers still need to capture hearts and minds. That won't change no matter what technology we've got wrapped around that. And if they're sort of not at the forefront of that purchasing process in a world where everything is starting to be very curated, I think those are the brands that are going to get lost. Again, these aren't new things. This is sort of classic Les and Peter stuff that they've talked about for a long, long time, but it becomes in sharper focus, I think, in a world where decisions are going to be made for us intentionally on our behalf that we ask them to. But doing that brand building bit is even more important, arguably, than how we've talked about it in the last few years, where I think we've accepted that I can build brand with this hand and I can do some sort of performance thing here. I mean, everything that we've seen in the last few years is that those two things are probably one and the same, whether you look at what YouTube are talking about or others. There isn't really this separation anymore, and I only think that's going to increase.
I guess the concern that I've often heard raised is if we can measure directly sort of outcomes in terms of someone literally saw this ad and clicked purchase, that maybe we start to incentivize ourselves toward those outcomes as opposed to the brand building that is much harder to measure, at least in the short or immediate term, but in the long term obviously does have a huge contribution, and that's been proven by studies like profitability too. So how do we make sure that we're not discounting brand when we have more and more signals telling us more information about sort of the lower funnel level of the, I guess, soon to not potentially be existing funnel?
Well, I think we have to empower marketers and CMOs with studies like you've talked about. There's a very, I think there's a sort of a stark reality that, that the CFO is far more interested in effectiveness. I talk about effectiveness not just as sort of vanity metrics and conversions, but longer term as well. It's far easier to articulate to a sort of a non-media, non-marketing, possibly non-digital person within the business, a stakeholder, X% increase in conversions or actions of something than it is, we're playing a long game, we're looking at it over a lot longer period of time, and actually I might not see any effect for a certain period of time. That requires someone attention. You're sort of grabbed in a corridor and asked if something's working. I think human nature says I'll kind of use the stuff that's easy to explain and that I can and gets my message across very quickly. So I think we have to resist the urge to do that. And I think, studies like profitability follow the evidence in all of this stuff because the science and the evidence is there to tell us. I think we sort of slightly have to wean ourselves off the kind of the performance very DR end that, that's a beauty that digital's kind of bought. But it's not the be all and end all. And of course, we mustn't forget about building brand, particularly in this AI-driven world that we're heading into.
Final question. You mentioned the funnel is a pretty old concept, dating back to the 19th century. Correct me if I've got the date wrong. But I'm curious if we're moving into a slightly more funnelless future, or if the funnels truly does collapse over the next couple of years, as it sounds like it might. Is there a heuristic that could act as a replacement in terms of, in our thinking, okay, maybe it's not a cone-shaped funnel, is there something else that we can that would help us visualize what the future looks like in terms of what advertisers should be thinking?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I wonder if no matter the kind of the shape, and ironically, I remember doing a presentation when I was working on mobile long before I joined the IAB, but it was a presentation for the IAB back at their old Macklin Street office, and it was all about funnels. And I sort of put up, here's 12 different funnels that people use, the sort of loyalty loop, there's the sort of original, and they're all kind of, some people talk about the messy middle, we're all kind of talking about the same thing. Regardless of the shape of it and the stages, I think is a really, really smart planner I used to work with, Jed Hallam, used to work with at Mindshare. And from a strategy point of view, he used to talk about, regardless of funnel and what you put the labels on, the best, most smartest brands are the ones that are really good at sort of using a scalpel rather than a machete. When you start thinking about audiences and you start thinking about what you're going to target them with what information and what kind of creative. And I just think that's just such a brilliant way to look at this. We can argue over the definitions and the terms and what the shape of things are going to be like and how much emphasis we put on them. But I think what digital has allowed and what I think we will accelerate towards is not these sort of big machete type things, which is like, I want to change awareness, therefore I need to do this sort of big block of something. It becomes a lot more sort of intricate in the way that you think about it, both from a creative and a planning point of view. So I don't know is the honest answer. I don't know what sort of heuristic we might sort of come up with to do it. I think maybe smarter people than I might do that. Maybe that's Futurescape 2.0. Maybe that's what we need to cover there.
Well, I'll be on the lookout for the next report. James Chandler, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts or on our website at themedialeader.co.uk. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified when we release our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.